Okay. Hare Krishna. So we have learned in the first chapter about how Arjuna, having seen the opposing army wherein he had to fight his own kinsmen, was in a total state of bewilderment. And he was, in that reluctance, he expressed to Krishna his inability to fight the war. And in the second chapter, we have seen how Arjuna surrendered to Krishna, accepting Krishna as a spiritual master. And therein, Krishna begins instructing Arjuna about the various philosophical truths and equips him, and he starts equipping him for the fight. He begins with Atma Gyan and followed by the explanation of the Atma Rama, etc., etc. In the second chapter, it's like all the contents of Gita are summarized. And in the third chapter, we have seen about how Arjuna was in a state of confusion because he did not understand whether Krishna is asking him to fight or is he asking him to renounce fighting. So at that time, we have seen how Krishna begins to explain about the importance of the difference between tyaga, the renunciation externally, and then how Krishna urges Arjuna actually to begin to fight the karma yoga, the process of karma yoga. He explains Arjuna about the various rungs of the yoga ladder, and Krishna explains also that even if you have reached the highest rung of the yoga ladder, still one continues to be a good example. He gives the example of Janak Maharaj. And then finally, he ends the third chapter by explaining about the eternal enemy of the soul. And we have seen in the third chapter how lust is the eternal enemy of the soul, which is causing the bondage to this material world. Krishna concludes the third chapter by saying that by deliberate spiritual intelligence, one can fight this enemy. So, what is that deliberate spiritual intelligence? What is the transcendental knowledge which helps a person to elevate oneself and to fight this eternal enemy and liberate oneself? That we're going to see in the fourth chapter, the transcendental knowledge. So, the acronym for the fourth chapter, the transcendental knowledge, is EARS. EARS, ears. So, why is it ears? Ears, because it's through the ears we receive knowledge. Okay, so please note down the acronym for the fourth chapter is EARS. E stands for eternal education. Yeah, today's topic is imperishable science, right? So eternal education. This is from verses 1 to 10. Okay, then A stands for accurate understanding. A stands for accurate understanding. This is from verses 11 to 15. 11 to 15. Then R stands for removing the reactions. This is from verses 16 to 24. Removing reactions, verses 16 to 24. And finally, S stands for sacrifice. This is from verses 25 to 42. That will be the last, the biggest session. That will be the final session of the fourth chapter. So EARS. EARS is the acronym for the fourth chapter. E is for eternal education. A stands for
accurate understanding.
Accurate understanding. And R stands for
removing reactions.
Removing the reactions. And S stands for
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Yes. So today we are going to do the first section, that is E. E for eternal education. So that was what the imperishable science is, the title. Okay, so all of you have seen the poster for today's class, right? Can anybody tell me what that poster is? Yes. What is the poster that I have sent you? Any guesses? Nobody understood what the poster is? Anybody? None of you got it?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes.
Krishna gave this Gita knowledge before to sun god Vivaswan. Then sun god gave this knowledge to Manu, and then
Yes. Who's this? May I know who just told the answer?
Srishma Mataji.
Rishma. Yes, exactly. So what you saw in the poster is, if it's available, Sindhuja, can you just show us the poster? So today in this first verse, we're going to discuss about the history of Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, the history, when was it first spoken? How old is the science? Yeah, that we're going to see. How do I mute? Anushka, can you, Anushka? Yeah. Sindhuja, is it going to take some time?
Mataji, actually, today I couldn't, so I made Srinija the host. She is sharing.
Oh, is it? Okay, fine. Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, Srinija is the host. I didn't know that.
Just now my battery was running low.
Okay. Yes, no problem. Okay. So meanwhile, we will just go along with the verse. We'll start with the verse. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanahamavvyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Mayur Ikshvakave Bravi.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyam Vivasvana Manave Praha Manu Ikshvakave Abravit.
Yeah, translation.
The personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku.
Yes, so this is the history of Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is telling about the deliberate spiritual intelligence. So he's talking about what is that intelligence? Is this something, is this knowledge something new? Or is it coming from a long time? Is this science something that has been a recent discovery? Or has it been coming from an age-old tradition? So this is what Krishna is telling, that I had already instructed about this imperishable science. So the very word imperishable science, it's a very, very poignant word. Yeah. Imperishable. That means it cannot be perishable. Nothing can deter it. It's eternal. That is why this is called eternal education. Yeah. So imperishable science. This science, I have already instructed it to Vivasvan. Who is Vivasvan? Vivaswan is the name of the sun god. So at the beginning of the creation, first the sun god, from him the other planets come. So Krishna has first instructed the science of Gita to Vivaswan. Vivaswan Manave Praha. Manave means Manu. Vivaswan has instructed this to Manu, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So who is Manu? Manu is, there are 14 Manus. Okay, let's first talk about Vivaswan, sun god. So sun god, as all of us know, uh, who is sun god? Every day we see sun in the sky. But did we ever think, or did it ever cross our mind that he is the first disciple of Krishna? So that's what Krishna is telling. So first I had instructed the science of Gita to Vivaswan, sun god. So why was this science given to sun god? Because Vivaswan, or the sun god, he's a Kshatriya. Kshatriya means he's the ruler of the planet sun. And anybody, he's the head of the planet, just like we have the Prime Minister of India, the head of the country. Similarly, Vivaswan is a Kshatriya and he's the head of the planet sun. And in fact, he's in charge of the other grahas also, the planets also. So he's a Kshatriya. So he was the head of the whole thing. So this science of Bhagavad Gita is supposed to be given to the head, the ruling head or the executive head of the state or head of the country or head of the planet. Why? For them to understand what is the essence of life, what is the meaning of life, and what is the purpose of life. And to them, that responsibility is given that they rule in such a way that this purpose is achieved by the citizens in general. That is the reason why Bhagavad Gita is a science that is given especially to the leaders of the society. Very, very important. Because unless they understand what is the essence and meaning of life, how will they direct their dependents? In the third week, in the third chapter, we have learned about how if the leader is blind, it's like blind following the blind. Everybody will fall into a ditch. That is the reason the leader or the person who's ruling the country or the state or the whole planet, they are supposed to be first enlightened about what is the purpose of life, what is the identity of a person, and what is the purpose of one's activities. So unless we begin with why, unless a person is in knowledge of why, all the activities that they're doing is just some random activities. Yes, so that is the reason the science has been first given to Vivaswan. And in fact, the Kshatriyas who come from sun god are called Suryavamshi. Suryavamsi Kshatriya. If you see, I think in North India, this clan is still existing, the Suryavamshi and the Chandravamshi. So Vivaswan has in turn given it to Manu. And who is Manu? Actually, Sindhuja, I have given you. Srinija, did Sindhuja send you 2 posters that I have sent to her?
I did,
Yes,
Mataji. She
Mataji.
asked.
Yeah. You send me the. Can you just show that Brahmaji's timeline?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, so Vivaswan, the sun god, has then shared this science to Manu. Who is Manu? Does anybody remember how many Manus are there in one day of Brahma? How many Manus are there? Yeah. Somebody said that?
14.
Exactly. Yes, Anushka, you're right. There are 14 Manus. Actually, the very word Manav, yeah, Manav or Manushya, it comes from Manu. Not this one, Brahma's time scale. Hare Krishna. Uh,
Mataji just came.
yeah. Okay. How many years is one Kali Yuga? Does anybody remember?
4,32,000 years.
Yes. And how many years is Dwapar Yuga? It's just the double of that.
8 lakhs change.
Yes. And how many years is Treta Yuga?
12 lakhs
Tra-
change.
Okay. And Satya Yuga?
16 lakhs change.
Okay. So all these four yugas together is called? All these four yugas together.
Manvantara.
No, no,
One
no.
yuga cycle.
Yeah, one yuga cycle, or it is also called one Divya Yuga. Okay. And one Divya Yuga is also called Kalpa. Are you going to be further delayed, Srinija?
Yes, Mataji.
Hmm? Yes. Could you all see this?
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah. The picture is not complete, Srinija. One second. Haribol, Path has come. Okay, it can't be enlarged. Forget it then. So one, um, as I said, 4 yugas together are called one Divya Yuga. So one Divya Yuga is 4.32 million years. That is when you add all of them together, it makes one Divya Yuga. So this Divya Yuga, 71 Divya Yugas make one Manvantara. That means that is the period of one Manu. And how many Manus are there? 14 Manus in one day of Brahma. That is one Kalpa of Brahma. Yeah. So this in this, I mean, Manu is the also called Prajapati. He's like the leader of the mankind. So sun god has delivered this science to Manu, and Manu has given it to Ikshvaku. Who is Ikshvaku? Ikshvaku is like the forefather of Lord Ram. So Lord Ram is, he's back in Treta Yuga. So when Lord Ram was about to descend to somewhere towards the beginning of Treta Yuga, there is towards the beginning of the Treta Yuga, Vivaswan has given it to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku has given it to, Vivaswan has given it to Manu. Manu has given it to Ikshvaku. And also one very interesting thing about these Yuga cycles is that only once in a day of Brahma that Krishna descends. This is the most interesting part. So Krishna does not descend in every Manvantara. He only descends in the 7th Manvantara. So we are so fortunate right now. We are in this particular phase. We are in the 7th Manu period, and we are in this Divya Yuga, and we are exactly in next. We are just 5,000 years ago. Krishna has appeared, and immediately after Krishna appears, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears. So we are at a very, very, very significant period in the whole history of Earth. That is, we are exactly present in that Divya Yuga where Krishna has appeared. And Krishna, as I said, appears only once in a day of Manvantara. So only when Krishna appears, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears to teach us the love of God. Okay. So that's about the history of Gita, to whom it was first given, and later how it has been passed on. And if you see, this is the importance of disciplic succession. Krishna gave it to sun god Vivaswan, Vivaswan gave it to Manu, and Manu gave it to Ikshvaku. That means the science is essentially passed on from one person to the other person. That is the importance of disciplic succession. Actually, Krishna explains about this importance of disciplic succession in the next verse. Text 2. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshyo viduhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashtah parantapa.
एवं परम्परा प्राप्तम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप.
Translation.
This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost.
Yeah. So here Krishna is telling that I have given this science to Vivaswan, but over a period of time, the chain of disciplic succession is broken. So that is why I'm again instructing it to you. So this is the process of hearing Gita. It has to come in a chain of disciplic succession. Evam parampara praptam. If you see, there are so many commentaries on Bhagavad Gita available in the market worldwide. But whenever you actually have to see a Bhagavad Gita, if you want to know if it's a standard book or not, if it's a standard commentary or not, the first check is that, is it coming in parampara? That's what Krishna is telling. The importance of parampara is that because it was broken, Krishna himself came to actually start the chain again. That's how important it is. Because if a person is not coming in parampara, that person cannot understand the essence. Recently, somebody was asking me so many questions after having read the Gita. Because once you read it yourself, you get a lot of doubts. How would you clarify? You clarify from a teacher. And the teacher should be coming in parampara. The teacher is not somebody who popped up on their own self. That teacher should have been a good student of another teacher. And that teacher should be a good student of another teacher. So this is what is called parampara. Not that today I declare myself as the biggest teacher and the glorious master, and I have myself realized all truths. No, this is not parampara. This is not the system that Krishna has given. Krishna is telling very clearly, evam parampara praptam. If you have to check if the guru is bona fide or the spiritual knowledge you're receiving is bona fide, how do we know? You know it only when the knowledge is connected to the parampara. The guru is connected to the parampara. That is when the system is bona fide. That is when you are receiving the knowledge as it is. That is why the Bhagavad Gita that we are studying is Bhagavad Gita as it is. That means it is coming from Krishna and from Krishna through the disciplic chain of succession, and wherein one passes on to the other as it is without any modifications or alterations or interpretations. There is this famous book called My Interpretations on Gita. I'm sure most of you have heard of this book. This is written by the biggest political leader of India. But unfortunately, the very name itself is so wrong. Why are you giving your interpretations on Gita? You should simply write what is coming in the chain of disciplic succession, the message that has been given to you by your guru. That is the way knowledge has to be transmitted, especially the spiritual knowledge. Okay. So, and Prabhupada writes a very strong statement in this particular purport. Prabhupada says that when Bhagavad Gita is accepted as it is, then it is a great boon to the society. But if you're simply accepting Bhagavad Gita as some kind of a philosophical treatise, that means some kind of, dry philosophy, it's simply a waste of time. It does not bring any transformation. So Bhagavad Gita should be accepted as it is, not how we interpret it to be. And how do we know how it actually is? That is why we have to read the purports of the acharyas who are coming in the disciplic succession. They give us the understanding, the inner meaning of a given verse. Text 3. Sa evayam maya tedya yogah proktah puratana bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hyetaduttamam.
स एवायं मया ते अद्य योगः प्रोक्तः पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं हि एतत् उत्तमम्.
Yes, text translation.
That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science.
Yes. So Krishna is telling that same science. I am now telling it again to you, O Arjuna. Why? For two reasons. Bhakto sime sakha cheti, because you're my bhakta, my devotee, and my friend, because I share a relationship with you. That's why I am giving you this science. So this is again a key factor to receive the knowledge of Gita. One should be a devotee of Krishna. That's when a person can understand what Krishna is speaking. In other words, one should not be envious of Krishna or put Krishna aside and just take the knowledge. This is what happened actually at the time of our during the time of our Indian independence era. So that was the time of the Second World War broke out. So many of the heads of different nations were looking towards India for a solution. Why they were all looking towards India? Because India is the hub of spirituality. And this spirituality is capable of bringing in universal peace. So all the countries, most of the heads of the nations, I can send you some wonderful quotes also of those times, where the heads of nations were looking to India for a solution, that too that were spiritual in nature. So, but that time in India, the leaders too were starting many revolutions based on the teachings of Gita. Yes, most of the prominent leaders, the warriors, I mean, the freedom fighters, they were carrying on their fights in the name of the principles of Gita. So initially, Swami Prabhupada was the founder Acharya of ISKCON. He was also part of the independence, the freedom fight. But then when he actually, because he was also inspired that these people are trying to bring Swaraj based on the principles of Gita, and a spiritual community can be built based on this principle. So, but when once he, Hare Krishna, Renija, yes, tell me.
From Karthik Reddy's account, Pataji. Can you make Karthik Reddy has hosting on it?
Karthik Reddy has to be the host. Okay, 1 second. Okay, done. Yes. So as I was telling, so at that time of the independence and the freedom struggle, most of the leaders of India who were leading so many revolutions, they were wanting to bring, start many revolutions based on the principles of Gita. But Prabhupada writes that though they said that it was based on the principles of Bhagavad Gita, they have missed out on the person Krishna. So they could not really translate those principles of Gita into the, the basis for their freedom struggles. So because of which eventually, though they have all worked on bringing about independence to India, and then later on, a lot of violence has happened. Because, millions and millions of people died in the process. So, I mean, why I'm giving you this reference is that it takes a devotee of Krishna to actually understand the message of Krishna. Okay, you wanted to find the war of independence, that's fine. But if you want to follow that, I mean, do that fight based on the principles of Gita, then you have to accept Krishna as a person, as the supreme personality, and you should be a devotee. That's when you are empowered to translate the teachings of Gita into practical application in your life, and not just in your life, into the lives of the people whom you are guiding. That is the importance. That's the importance of this verse when Krishna is telling, Bhaktosi me sakha cheti. It's telling Arjuna, because you are my friend and my devotee, that is why I'm giving this science to you. And so whoever carries the spirit of Arjuna within them, that is a devotee being devoted to the Supreme Lord Krishna, and also, accepting him in a relationship, they can truly understand the message of Gita. And in our stage, even though we might not be great devotees or we might not have developed the relationship with Krishna, at least if we hear from a person who is embodying these two qualifications, then we can receive the same effect of Gita. That's the beauty of the whole principle. Parampara Prapta. Okay. Text 4. Text 4. Arjuna Uvacha अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथम् एतद् विजानीयां त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति.
अर्जुन उवाच अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद् विजानीयं त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति.
Yes. Translation.
Arjuna said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him?
Yes. So here comes a twist. Twist is Arjuna has asked Krishna a question. What did he ask Krishna? The sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. You're telling you have instructed the science first to Vivaswan, sun god. But Vivaswan is like, long ago he was born. And how am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed the science to him? So right now you are present right in front of me. That is, Krishna at the battlefield of Kurukshetra was just over 100 years old. And Vivaswan sun god means he was there 2 million years ago. Actually, Prabhupada gives a wonderful calculation. When any of you is good at mathematics, you can go through the purport of the first verse. In that, Prabhupada gives the entire calculations of where exactly we are, how many years of Manu we have passed by, and where exactly in the timeline of Brahma we are exactly present, and how many years back Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Prabhupada gives the entire calculation. So by that calculations, about 2 million years ago, Bhagavad Gita has been spoken. So thinking that 2 million years ago it has been spoken, Arjuna is asking Krishna, so how did you speak to Vivaswan 2 million years ago? And how do you remember that? Now here comes the twist. There are 5 subject matters that Gita is teaching us about. What are these 5 subject matters? Ishvara,
Prakriti,
Ishvara, Kala, Prakriti, Karma, Jiva, exactly. Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, Karma, and Prakriti. So we learned something about Jiva Tattva in the second chapter. So Karma we learned in the last chapter, Karma Yoga. Kala we will learn later on. Prakriti also we will learn later on. But here now, from now, what he's going to start is about the Ishvara Tattva. So Arjuna's question is going to bring in that clarity to us. So why did Arjuna ask Krishna this question? Arjuna is himself a devotee and he knows that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he himself explains in the 10th chapter of Gita. He knows that Krishna is God himself. But for ordinary people like us who are hearing Bhagavad Gita for the first time, who do not know the position of Krishna, on behalf of all of us, this is the question Arjuna is putting forth to Krishna. Because any of us, any ordinary person or any Jivatma as such, do we know what is our previous birth? We do not know, right? We don't know. Forget previous birth. Do we really remember what we did? What did we have for breakfast day before yesterday? We have to scratch our head for some time. This is our limited memory. But here Krishna is telling, I have spoken this science to Vivaswan, the sun god. So Arjuna is asking, how is that possible that you remember that? Because as ordinary souls, or even the best of human beings, Arjuna is Arya. Aryan means he's the best of the human beings. He himself does not know what happened in his previous birth. And how come, Krishna, you know about, something that has happened 2 million years ago? 2 million years ago, does any of us know who we were, which body we were, what we were doing, what are our activities? Can you even think of that we existed 2 million years ago? It's mind-boggling. It's inconceivable to our intelligence and mind and memory. So this is when the Ishwar Tattva is starting. But God is a person who can actually remember all that. So here Arjuna is asking Krishna to explain that, because who can tell about oneself better than God himself? If you want to know God, we might speculate with our tiny intelligence, or we might understand by some pramanas. But to actually understand the Ishvara Tattva, Ishvara himself has to speak. Krishna himself has to tell who he is, what his position is. If he does not do that out of his compassion, we can never begin to understand what Ishvara Tattva is. So that is why Arjuna begins to, bring the discussion to the platform where he's requesting Krishna to please explain him about himself, about why is and how is that he remembers all the previous instances, while as jivas, as ordinary living entities, we are incapacitated to remember anything from previous life itself, what to speak of 2 million years ago. Yeah. So, and especially Arjuna's such a request is to, put aside the atheistic attitude of people who actually try to label Krishna as an ordinary person. Yes, if you see the common man thinking, some people say Krishna, okay, he was just another a historical personality who just happened to appear 5,000 years ago. Yeah. Some people even call him a mythological. He's, the personality itself is a myth. And some people say that, he was a historical person. That's it. Or some people, he says he's a great politician. He's a great diplomat. These are the all mental speculations of people. But who exactly is Krishna? This is what Prabhupada is telling. This is what Arjuna is telling. You don't begin to speculate. You hear from Krishna himself who he is. So that's how now Krishna is explaining about his point. Text 5. Shri Bhagavan Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava charjuna tanyaham veda sarvani natvam vetta parantapa.
श्रीभगवानुवाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तव च अर्जुन तानि अहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेद परन्तप.
Beautiful. Yes, please. Yeah.
The personality of Godhead said, many, many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot. O Subuduru of the enemy.
Yes. Oh, subduer of the enemy.
Subduer, okay.
Thank you. So this is when Krishna is out of his compassion is explaining about his position to Arjuna and to all of us. Yeah, bahuni me vyatitani. Bahuni means many, many. I have, gone through many, many births. Not just me, you and me have gone through many births. Yeah, Janmani Tavacharjuna. Tanyaham Veda Sarvani. Tanyaham Veda Sarvani. Tani means all of them, Veda Sarvani. That means I know all of them. Yeah, and it's a Natvam Vetta Parantapa. That means, but you do not know all of them. Why Krishna called him Parantapa, the subduer of the enemies? Arjuna is, he's a great person. He's not an ordinary person. He's a great warrior. He's famous for his prowess. But he himself, he does not know what is his previous birth. So Krishna is telling, Bahuni Janmani Vyatitani. That means we have passed through many, many, many births, both you and me. But I remember all of them, you do not remember. So this is the difference between God and living entity. This is the difference between Ishvara and Jiva. Yeah, Jiva is Anu. Anu means tiny. we spoke about this, what is the size of the living entity? Yeah, 1 by 10,000 tip of the hair of person. That's the size. God is Vibhu, that means he's infinite. God is infinite, Jiva is infinitesimal. In mathematics, you have the term infinitesimal, right? That means insignificant. You can't even count how small it is. But Lord is infinite. That means you can't even measure him. So, and that's one of the difference. And Lord is omniscient. He's the knower of everything. But our understanding, our knowledge, it's limited. And he's omnipotent. That means he can do anything. But what about what we are capable of? We're capable of very limited things. Like, for example, at this moment, I think if I want to be in Antarctica, it's just a wish. I cannot be there. My potency is limited. Yeah. So, but God is not like that. He can do anything he wants. That's what is called omnipotent. So there is a beautiful verse in the Brahma Samhita which speaks about the nature of God, Ishvara Tattva. It says, Advaitam Achyutam Anadi Mananta Rupam. Advaitam Achyutam Anadi Mananta Rupam. Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha. Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhaktau. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So Lord Brahma offering these praises to the Supreme Lord, he glorifies him as Advaitam. Advaita means Dvaita, means two. Advaita means one without a second. So Advaita means a person, there is nobody similar to Krishna. There is nobody equal to Krishna. That is Advaita. Another meaning of Advaita means for a living entity, for a jiva, the body is different from the soul, right? What we are, our eternal identity is the soul, but we are covered over by this body, which is not our identity. But for Krishna, there is no difference between his body and the soul. Yes, there is no difference between his body and the soul. His body itself is Sachidananda Vigraha. For us, the living entity, the jiva, the soul, the Atma is Sachidananda. But for Krishna, the body itself is Sachidananda Vigraha. There is no difference between his body and soul. And his body is not like our body that is made of bones, veins, etc. It's a very same substance as the soul, that is Sat, Chit and Ananda. For example, when this Bhagavad Gita discussion is taking place, Krishna had so many grandchildren back in Dwaraka. He was over 100 years old. But how did he look? He was Navayovanamcha. That means there is technically when a person's body ages, they go through different phases. Yeah, there is Kaumara. Kaumara means boyhood, 1 to 5 years of age. After that is Pauganda, 5 to 10 years of age. 10 to 15 years of age is Kaishora, and 15 years over till 20 years is Yovana. Yeah, these are the 4 stages of boyhood to youthhood, or girlhood to youthhood person goes through. But Krishna is Navayovana. That means in the eternal spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan, the eternal age of Krishna is 16 years. He never grows beyond that age. That's why Krishna is called Nitya Kishora. And Radharani's age is 13 years. Eternally, she is of that age, 13 years. That's why Radharani is also called Nitya Kishori. Krishna is called Nitya Kishora or Navayovana. That means after finishing the Kaishora age, that is 15 years, he's just entering into youth, just coming to 16 years, that is Yovana. That's it. After that, Krishna's body does not become older than that. But what about our body? Our body, all of us know, it's we have no control over old age. Can we control? Now, if I say I have to just remain 16 years, I don't want to grow beyond that. Is it in my control? No. I am subjected to the laws of nature, and my body has to go through, the process, even without my desire. Yes, this is the limitation of the human being. But God is not that way. As I said, Krishna, God, means he's omnipotent. That means he desires and anything can happen. Krishna does not age beyond that 16 years. That's why he's Navayovanam cha. And Advaitam, as I said, there is no difference between his body and the soul. Achyutam means infallible. Infallible means he never forgets himself. That is, for example, and as I said, we forget what has happened in the past birth or a birth before that. But Krishna is not like that. He's not forgetful of anything, or he's not forgetful of his own divinity at any point of time. It's not that, like, for example, all of us are in a position where we have all forgotten our eternal position, right? That means we are subjected to the illusion of Maya, and we have to revive our original identity through the process of spirituality. But Krishna is not like that. He never forgets himself. He does not need to undergo a process to revive his godliness. And when he was born, he was months old. When Putana, the giant demoness, came to him, he exhibited his potency and killed her, smashed her. Trinavata was such a wind demon, uncontrollable. He smashed that demon. A number of demons he has killed. The kind of pastimes he has exhibited, by dancing on a serpent which has 1,000 hoods, named Kalia, by lifting a Govardhan hill when he was 7 years of age. So God is God at all times. It's not that somebody has, he has to evolve to become God. He's God, period. Anytime he's God. So that is infallible nature. He does not forget himself. So that's what he's telling Arjuna here. That is, I do not forget any of this, Arjuna, but you have forgotten because you are a jiva. And this is the situation of any jivatma for that matter. So Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim. Anadim means he has no origin himself. So all the jivas have come from Krishna. Even this Krishna explains in the 15th chapter. Mamaiva amsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Mana shashtani indriyani prakritim sthani karshati. Mana, that means mama eva amsha. All the living entities are my amshas. Krishna tells this to Arjuna. And so origin of all the jivas is Krishna. But what is the origin of Krishna? Anadi. That means he has no origin. Ananta Rupam. Yeah, Adyam Purana Purusham, as it means, as I said, he's the oldest person in this creation. But he is Navayovanamcha. He's ever youthful, ever fresh, ever young. Does not age beyond 16. So this is a glimpse of Krishna's personality. We can just go on and on. I'm afraid we will not move to the next verse. So we'll just go to the next verse. So here, that's why Krishna is telling Arjuna that I remember all the past births, but you do not. So all these verses are very, very beautiful. The first 10 verses are very famous verses, very important verses, very sweet verses. Yeah, next verse. Text 6. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanamishwaropi san prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavyami atma mayaya.
अजोऽपि सन्नव्ययात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय सम्भवाम्यात्ममायया.
Translation.
Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
Yeah. So although I'm unborn and my transcendent body never deteriorates, we have discussed about this. And I'm the Lord of all living entities. I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. As I said, Krishna appears in his original transcendental form once in a day of Brahma. As I also spoke to you about, we are actually living in a very, very important and significant period in the time scale of this universe. And we have to make the best use of this opportunity, because when Krishna descends, immediately after Lord Krishna descends, he also appears as in his devotee incarnation and gives us the practical ways of living a devotional life and going back to him. So it's a very, very effective period where the highest benedictions are given and the easiest ways out are given for us to practice. Yes. Okay, we will move to the next verses. Seventh verse. This is very, very famous verse, which we have heard a lot of times. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham.
यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
Yes. So now Krishna is explaining about when he descends. Yeah. That is, all of us are born because of our, why? Because of our karmas. That means we do good karmas, we have good births, we do bad karmas, we have a bad birth, or whatever. So we are born because we are subject to the laws of nature. But Krishna, we don't say Krishna is born, we say Krishna descends. There's a difference. We don't descend, we take birth. But Krishna descends. That's why we call Krishna's birthday as actually appearance day. Krishna appears. He appears and disappears by his own sweet will. But on the other hand, for a Jivatma, the Jivatma takes birth being forced by the laws of nature, into whatever body based on the karmas that he or she has performed in the past lives. That's the difference between our birth and the Lord's appearance. The Lord does not take birth just like all human beings take birth. He descends, and he descends for a purpose. And what is the purpose? That purpose is this. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever there is a decline of religious principles. So this was when Kamsa was ruling over Mathura, and there was a lot of demoniac kings who were populating the entire earth. And so Bhumi Devi, unable to bear their, the weight of these people, she goes and complains to Brahmaji that this is what is happening. And so they all go and appeal to the Lord to kindly descend and rectify the situation. So that is when Lord descends. He descended for the purpose of what? He also speaks about later. There was a decline of religious principles, and whenever there's a predominant rise of irreligion. So dharma, whenever there is decline of religious principle, that means whenever there is decline of dharma, that is when Krishna descends. Because Krishna is the upholder of dharma. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. So whenever there is a decline in the religious principle or dharma, Krishna either descends himself or he sends any of his empowered incarnation to correct the situation. This is how, the Lord periodically gives his mercy. Some people ask this question. Okay, so if God is the creator of this universe, if God is the creator of this world, why is that, when so much of evil is happening, why he is not intervening, why he is not coming down? Yeah, is it that he just created this, he made this creation and he just left, he retired? No, Krishna is telling, whenever there is a rise in irreligion, I personally descend, or he sends his empowered representative in the form of a very powerful guru. For example, time and again, Krishna has sent so many acharyas, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Nimbarkacharya, and all the great acharyas coming in the disciplic succession. Yes, and they are the ones who are carrying this message of God, and they're propagating it to in different directions for the benefit of humanity. In Jesus Christ, and it's not necessary. Prabhupada writes, it's not necessary that he descends only in India. And different times, according to time, place, and circumstances, he appears in different avatars. Like as Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, he always called himself, I am the Son of God. Yeah, that means he's the representative of God. So he appeared in that part of the world. And he delivered the message of Krishna according to the understanding level of the people over there. And so is Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, Prophet Muhammad means, Muhammad is his name. Prophet means one who, propagates the teachings of God. That means that is the meaning of prophet. So he called himself a messenger of God. He never called himself God. Similarly, Jesus Christ, he never called himself God. He said, I am the Son of God. But here Krishna is telling clearly that I am God myself. Yes, so that is a difference, and that is what is the meaning of Shrijamyaham. Shrijami, yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyudhanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrijamyaham. That means by my own desire and my free will, I manifest. So by his desire, Lord manifests. So that is again the difference between Ishvara and Jiva. So as I said, the time scale. So the appearance of Krishna is also determined by the time scale. He is scheduled to appear in the 7th Manu, in the 28th millennium of the 7th Manu. Or the Dwapar Yuga of the 28th millennium. 28th millennium means that Yuga, 28th Yuga of the 7th Manu. In each Manu, as I said, there are 71 Yugas, right? So in the 71 Yugas, in the 28th Yuga of the 7th Manu, of the 14 Manus, the 7th Manu, the 28th Yuga, in that Yuga, in that Divya Yuga, the Dwapar Yuga, Krishna is scheduled to appear. So that happened just in, before this Kali Yuga that we are a part of. So that, all the descent of the Lord is also scheduled, and he comes on time as per his schedule. Okay. So, and as I said, the principles of Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna. And so, yeah, and as I said, when Krishna comes, when there is a decline in the religious principles. So what are these religious principles which Krishna speaks about? So these religious principles first start with having a proper social order of Varna and Ashrama. And later there are higher definitions of Dharma, but it begins with the basic social structure of proper Varna and Ashrama. So text 8. And when Krishna comes, what does he do? Next. Paritrāṇāya sadhūnām vināṣāya ca duṣkritāṃ dharma samsthapanārthāya sambhavāmi yuge yuge.
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे.
Yes, translation.
To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appeared millennium after millennium.
Yes. So this is the purpose. This is also a very famous verse we have heard many times. Paritranaya sadhunam. That is to deliver the devotees. Vinashaya cha dushkritam. So to annihilate the demons. So of these two, Paritranaya sadhunam and Vinashaya cha dushkritam, of these two, the more important reason why Krishna descends is to actually deliver his devotees. Because for just killing the demons, he need not personally appear. He can just do it by his mere sankalpa, or he can just send one of his, you know, one of his follower or devotee to do that. So he need not, or he can send an empowered incarnation. He need not personally descend for this purpose of vinashaya cha dushkritam, but for paritranaya sadhunam, that means to deliver his devotees, especially to do to exchange love with his devotees. That's one of the main reason why he descends. Like, for example, Krishna did not have to descend personally to kill Kamsa. He could have done that by any of his agent, but he came personally to deliver Devaki and Vasudev from this, pathetic situation. He personally came to give his love and association to all the Brajvasis, the Vrindavan Vasis. So he had so much of love for all the devotees of Vrindavan that as soon as he descended, he immediately was taken, desired to go to Vrindavan, and Vasudev orchestrated it. So why, what is the beauty of Vrindavan? Because everybody in Vrindavan had full-fledged love for Krishna. Wherever there is such love, Krishna is automatically attracted, and that's his very purpose. He comes to reciprocate with their love. Yeah, and dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So for the establishing of dharma, and as I said, dharma has different shades, and starting with varnashram dharma, then the highest understanding is the jaiva dharma. Jaiva dharma is to develop unalloyed love and devotion for the Lord. Sambhavami yuge yuge. Every yuga I appear. So you might ask me, then Kali Yuga has started. Did the Lord appear? Because Lord appeared in Satya Yuga, in Treta Yuga as Lord Ram, in Dwapar Yuga as Krishna. Then in Kali Yuga, what is the Yuga avatar? So in the Kali Yuga, the Yuga avatar is Chenna avatar. Chenna means it's a covered incarnation. And he has descended as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago as the devotee of Krishna himself. Yeah, and this prediction is there in Bhagavatam, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sangopangasta Pashadam Yajnai Sankirtana Prayer Yajanti Sumedasa. I told you about this verse before. Yeah, so Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam. So the Lord descends with all his associates in the Kali, in the age of Kali, and spreads the Sankirtana movement. What is Sankirtana movement? It's the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, by which deliverance is guaranteed. Okay, so text 9. जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेत्ति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नैति मामेति सोऽर्जुन.
जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेत्ति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नेति मामेति सो अर्जुन.
A very important verse. Translation.
One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna.
Yeah. So, before understanding the activities of a person, we should try to understand the person. Yeah. So we all are, as Indians, we're all familiar with the activities of Krishna, right? We all heard of, right from childhood, we heard of how Krishna stole butter from many, the houses of many gopis, or we know how Krishna has stolen the garments of gopis, or how Krishna has married so many wives in Dwaraka, 16,108 wives. Yeah, and or Krishna, how he has performed rasa dance with so many gopis in the middle of the night. So these are the activities of Krishna, right? So before entering into the activities of Krishna, we should first try to understand who that person is. That is when we'll be able to appreciate his activities. If not, we tend to misunderstand. We're bringing down the person to our level. Yes, that is why we have spent some time understanding what is the nature of God, what is the difference between Jiva and Ishvara. Now we have understood how he is different from the Jiva in that he is omniscient and he's the knower of even past births, past, present, and future. In fact, Krishna is also called Trikalagnya. Trikalagnya means he knows the past, present, and the future. Three kalas. Jna means he's a knower of it. Yes, and we have also seen many other differences, and we understood what is his purpose. Why did he descend? And what is the glory of knowing about him? That is what is stated in this particular verse. Just by understanding the transcendental nature of his birth and pastimes. Janma karma chame divyam. Divya means transcendental. It is not ordinary. Yeah, evam yo veti tattvataha. Anybody who understands the nature of this. Tyaktva deham punarjanma. Naitimam etiso Arjuna. That means after leaving this body, they will not take birth again. Simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the birth and pastimes of the Lord, just by able to understand them in truth, a person gets liberated. That is the glory of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So it's like, and what does it take to understand that? It begins with oral reception, and more so, it begins with faith. So faith is, a belief in something sublime. And actually, faith is a currency by which we can enter the spiritual path. And faith is something that makes you see the invisible. It makes you feel the intangible and makes you achieve the impossible. That is the beauty of faith. I will tell you a small story. The story of cobbler. Once there was a cobbler and there was a Brahmana. So this cobbler was sitting under a big banyan tree and he was just, making shoes. So at that time, Narada Muni was passing by. And out of his mercy, he appeared to that cobbler. And cobbler immediately when he saw Narada Muni, he stood up, he offered his respects and obeisances. And he said, "My dear Lord, I'm very grateful that I have your darshan." So, and Narada Muni said, "Yes, I'm on my way to Vaikuntha. Do you have any message for the Lord?" And he said, "No, please offer my humble obeisances to the Lord and my gratitude for all that he has given to me." And he was very happy just by the darshan of Narada Muni. So Narada Muni just goes a little ahead and there he finds a Brahmana. So this Brahmana was very, very austere, very knowledgeable. And, he was a Veda Pandita. And, very, very fixed in his, in the way he used to practice his things. So Narada Muni he saw Narada Muni and he offered his respects. And Narada Muni says, "I'm on my way to Vaikuntha. Do you have anything to say?" Then that man asked, the Brahmana asked, Yes, you ask Lord Narayana when I'm going to go back to Vaikuntha." Narada Muni says, "Okay, fine. I will do that." And so Narada Muni goes to Vaikuntha and he says, "Narayana, Narayana." So and there was Lord Narayana. And as soon as he sees Narayana, he starts glorifying, singing great praises and glories to him. And he asked, "My dear Narada Muni, how come you are here?" Then Narada Muni says, "I'm just coming from Bhuloka and there are two devotees of yours, the cobbler and the Brahmana. And they're eager to know when they will return back to Godhead." Then Lord Narayana tells, okay, Narada, just go back to them and tell them that I am passing an elephant's trunk through the eye of a needle. Then Narada Muni was like perplexed. Why is he telling me to go and tell this? But he says that whatever Lord Narayan tells, there is an inner meaning to this. Okay, let me go and do that. And so he goes back to the earth and he first meets the Brahmana. And he tells the Brahmana, and Brahmana sees Narada, and Narada asks, the Brahmana asks, "So have you met the Lord?" Narada says, "Yes, I did." "So did you ask him when I'm going to come back to him?" He said, Yes. What was he doing then? He said, "When I met the Lord, he was passing an elephant through the eye of a needle." And the Brahmana said, I know, you must be joking. How can you pass an elephant through the eye of a needle? The eye of a needle is so tiny and an elephant is so huge. How can he be doing that? So neither you must be joking or you must be kidding or you might not have met the Lord himself. So this was his response. Then he goes to the cobbler. And he says, Narayana, Narayana, and he goes to the cobbler. And, the cobbler was busy doing his job. And he sees Narada, and again he offers his obeisances. So Narada says, he asks Narada, so have you met the Lord? He said, yes, I have met the Lord. What was my Lord doing? And he says, Lord Narayana, he was passing a huge elephant through the eye of a needle. And immediately the cobbler felt very happy. He says, the glories and the leelas of my Lord are infinite. And he says he feels very jubilant hearing that. Then Narada Muni asks him, my dear cobbler, do you believe this, what I have just told you? Do you think it is possible? Then the cobbler said, why not? My Lord can do anything. This huge banyan tree that I am sitting under, he made it evolve from a tiny seed. So is anything impossible for him to do? If he can manifest such a big tree out of a small seed, why can't he, pass an elephant through the eye of a needle? Nothing is impossible for my Lord. Then Narada Muni, after hearing both the answers, he goes back to the Lord and says, this is what they're saying. And the Lord says, yes, the Brahmana the cobbler is going to come back to me in this very lifetime, and the Brahmana will take many more births to actually come to that level of understanding. So that's what he goes back and tells them. The Brahmana was very disappointed. Said, what is this? I am such an Austrian Brahmana and I'm the knower of all the Vedanta and I have to wait for so many births. And this cobbler, who's just sitting under a tree and doing some work with the chappal, he's going to go back to God. He couldn't digest that. So this is the beauty of faith. So the cobbler had that invincible faith in the Lord, that my dear Lord can do anything. And, that faith opened the doors for him to go back to the spiritual world. Whereas this Brahmana, he has been, going through all the Shastras, but has missed out on the purpose of Shastras. That's why in the previous verse, Brahma Samhita, we recited, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Nava Yauvanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhaktau. Vedeshu Durlabham. Durlabham means impossible. From the Vedic literature, just by understanding the Vedic literature or being a Vedic scholar, Lord is impossible to attain, Durlabham. But Adurlabham Atma Bhaktau. Adurlabham means he is very much possible to attain. How? By Atma Bhaktau, by the devotees. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. This is the nature of the Supreme Lord. So this is what is the importance of faith, having faith in the words of Krishna, having faith in the process that is given to us by Krishna, and to sincerely practice it. So faith is, they say faith can move mountains. So faith can actually bring us, actually not just bring us, bring us to the lotus feet of the Lord. Faith can actually open the doors of the spiritual world for us. So in fact, our bhakti, the process of devotion begins with this faith. So what is that? Different levels of bhakti that we are going to see in the next verse, the last verse of the day. Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashritah bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagata.
वीतरागा भयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिता बाहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागता.
Translation.
Being from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by the knowledge of me, and thus they all attain transcendental love for me.
Yeah. So, so now here Krishna is speaking about that for a person who is too materially attached, he cannot understand me. But those persons who are fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, they can actually attain me. So Krishna is telling about the process, and he's continuing about the importance of faith in attaining him. Yes, in fact, in the famous book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it speaks about how the devotional life begins with faith. Bhakti has 9 stages. Yeah, Adav Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha Brajan of Kriya Tatho Anartha Nivritti. So if you can just, yeah. So this is, can you all see this picture? Yeah. So there is something called Bhakti Lata Bija. Bija means seed. When the seed of devotion is sown in our heart, so from that seed fructifies something called Bhakti Lata. Bhakti Lata means the creeper of devotion. So what is a bija and what is the beginning stage? The first stage, Shraddha. Shraddha means the awakening of faith. You can take down these 9 stages of bhakti, very, very important. Actually, the details are given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's another book. Probably we can do it after Bhagavad Gita. So this is just a glimpse. So the first stage is Shraddha. Shraddha means the awakening of faith. So everybody has an initial Shraddha, initial faith that we are either carrying from previous lives, or in this life we get that faith because of the mercy of a devotee or by the association of some devotees. So that is called Shraddha. That's the beginning of devotional life, where there is awakening of faith in the field of the heart. So after Shraddha, what happens? The second stage is Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha means associating with saints or devotees. So what we are all doing every Sunday by coming together and trying to understand the message of Godhead, this is Sadhu Sangha. This is taking the association of devotees. And it's one of the most important aspects of bhakti. In fact, it is by the association of devotees one can sustain, maintain, and progress in devotional life. The great saint Ramanujacharya said that even if you don't do anything in bhakti, just do one thing. Just go and be with devotees, and they will take you where they have to go. Sadhu Sangha is very, very, very important. In fact, once Prabhupada said, if you think you can progress in devotional life without the association of devotees, you are insane. In other words, it is impossible. It's not possible. Okay, so that's the second stage, is Sadhu Sangha. Third is Bhajana Kriya. Bhajana Kriya means it's a practice of devotional service. Everything like our Shravanam, Kirtanam, it comes under Bhajana. That means every day chanting a fixed number of rounds, or doing Nama Sankirtan, offering prayers to the Lord, sincere ardent prayers to the Lord, Archanam, and all these are Bhajana. Bhajana Kriya. Yeah, actually most of us are in the stage of Bhajana Kriya. There is a great book called Madhurya Kadambini written by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a great saint of who was 400 years ago. All these Utsahamayi, Ganatarla, all these are details of that book. So right now we're not going to get into those details. I'm just talking about the stages. It's Bhajana Kriya. Then the fourth stage is Anartha Nivritti. Anartha Nivritti is clearing the obstacles to bhakti. So this stage is very, very, it depends on the sincerity of the sadhaka basically. It's a very prolonged stage. What are anarthas? Anarthas means for example, our 6 anarthas, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. Yeah. Lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and envy. These are the 6 anarthas, obstacles that are very, very, very difficult to overcome, because we have been developing these anarthas since millions of births. So in one birth to give them up, it's difficult. But then Anartha Nivritti is that stage of bhakti when a sadhaka is sincerely trying to overcome them by sincere practice of devotional service. Yeah, by doing good sadhana, by trying to serve great Vaishnavas, by receiving the mercy of the Lord, the stage is cleared, anartha nivritti. And after this anartha nivritti happens, the fifth stage comes, which is called nishtha. Nishtha means a person is firmly fixed in devotional service. That means nothing can come and move them. Till anartha nivritti, still there are a lot of disturbances in the person's mind. You know, if a person comes and brainwashes the person might, think, oh, maybe something, I'm, maybe lost, I'm just brainwashed, I have to go the other way. There's still instability in one's devotional life, instability in the spiritual path. They think there may be something else in life or something else that I want to do right now, etc., etc. So all these are they come in the obstacles. But once a person comes to nishtha stage, a person becomes fixed. That means unshakable resolve to practice bhakti. You know that there's nothing else can shake them. Come what may, this is all I want to do in life, or birth after birth. So that stage is called nishtha. And a person in this nishtha stage also becomes very fixed in serving one's spiritual master. For them, the orders and service of their guru is their life and soul, because they understand what the relationships in their real terms. Yeah. After nishtha is the fifth stage, right? And after nishtha comes ruchi. So ruchi is developing the taste. At this level, the sixth stage, a person develops a taste for devotion, taste for hearing the glories of Krishna, a taste for chanting the holy names of Krishna. It means they cannot live without it. Wow. I cannot live without hearing about Krishna, or I cannot, you see some people, some great saints, they're just so addicted in devotion to Krishna, or, addicted in their love for Krishna or the Supreme Lord. That is ruchi. That means developing a taste. See, right now we all have a taste for, we have to forcefully bring our mind to spiritual life. I'm trying to understand, yes, this is the need of the hour. This is what we must do. This is reality. We need some intellectual conviction. We need some push. We need some, something to push internally, somebody to push externally. We need a lot of push and mercy. But once you come to ruchi, there is no need of any push, because it's a natural taste. I can't live without it. So that's the stage of ruchi. It's a very advanced stage. Yeah, that is right now what attraction we have for the material objects, like great food, great music, or great fun. What attraction we have, that attraction is totally directed to Krishna. We enjoy only the spiritual rasa. That's ruchi stage, sixth. Then asakti. So asakti means attached to Krishna. You develop a deeper attachment. Asakti means first you develop a taste, and then you develop a total attachment. Rati. That means, the bond is formed with the Lord, and you're in that relationship. So you begin to enjoy that attachment. That's also a very advanced stage. From here on, it's a very all the advanced stages of bhakti. After nishtha, above nishtha is all the advanced stage of bhakti. So after asakti comes bhava. Bhava means where you develop emotions for the Lord. And these emotions are not mundane or material emotions, but transcendental emotions. You begin to develop feelings and emotions for the Lord. That is bhava. And the final stage is prema. Prema means it is pure love for Krishna, unalloyed. That means there is no adulteration, pure love of God. That awakens, and that's the highest stage of bhakti. And once having attained that stage of love, pure love of God, a person never falls down, ever in life. So, and prema, as I said, there is, and also in prema also there are different levels of love. That is, there is raga, mana, pranaya, sneha, mana, pranaya, raga, anuraga, bhava, and mahabhava. There are different levels of prema also. So this is, the ocean of devotion. I just explained to you in a small brief understanding. So what I'm trying to say is, where does it all starts? The root of it starts with faith. So faith is the belief in something sublime. That's where the awakening of bhakti begins. Okay, thank you all very much. Any questions or discussions so far? Any questions? There is somebody who asked me some questions on the WhatsApp. Is she present now?
Yes, Mataji.
Who is it?
I have asked a question in WhatsApp.
Yeah. What's your good name? And Sirisha, na?
Chandana Sahiti.
Chandana Sahiti. Chandana Sahiti, yes. Okay, Chandana Sahiti has asked me some questions. I will just try to answer that question here. She asked some interesting questions. She was asking me about from where is the soul born? Yeah, the soul is born, as I have told you. All the souls have originated from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is stated in the 15th chapter of Gita. Yeah, Mamai Vamsha Jiva Loke. The soul has originated and from the Supreme Lord Himself. Then does it mean there is an countable existing souls? Yes, but we cannot count. They are countable, but not countable by human intelligence. Krishna keeps a track of each of that. Okay. Then, and the number will remain same. It depends on Krishna's will. If Krishna wishes, the number expands. If Krishna says, let it be constant, it will be constant. But it is said, the spiritual world is ever expanding. It's in a state of expansion. It's not constant. In end of Kali Yuga, everything will be ended. Again, the Shrishti gets started. Then if at the end of Kali Yuga, if all go to the spiritual world near God, then would Maya again conquer them? Okay, so these are two different questions. At the end of Kali Yuga, when everything ends, it's not that everybody goes back to Godhead. Not necessary. When the pralaya comes and the overall annihilation takes place, all the souls who have attained liberation, who have attained perfection will go back to Godhead. But people, all the souls who have not yet attained perfection, who are still rebellious, they enter back into the called the supta stage of the Supreme Lord. Yeah. So they go into a kind of sleeping state, supta stage. Then again, when creation begins, all these the souls who have not yet cleared their karmas, who have not yet attained perfection, are again placed back in the material world, again to go through the process of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi and purification, and they're further again and again given opportunities for getting purified and to go back to Godhead. Yeah. So it's not that the end of Kali Yuga means people go back to Godhead. No. Unless a person attains the qualification, a person cannot go back to Godhead. Would Maya conquer them once a person goes to spiritual world? No. Krishna promises in Bhagavad Gita that yad gatva na nivartante param dham, tad dhamam paramamama. That means once gone back to Godhead, a person will never return. That is a promise Krishna gives. So once a soul is purified, and attains a perfection and goes back to Godhead, they will never return back to the material world. And will souls in spiritual world again ask for human life? I'm sure nobody will do that again. Once having tasted the kicks of Maya, any sane soul will never do that they want to go back to the material world. But there are souls who are perfected beings who wish to assist the Lord in his mission. That is, they want to assist, the Lord in his mission, or that's how there are many great souls who are called Nitya Siddhas. There are two types of souls. There are Nitya Siddhas and there are Nitya Baddhas. Nitya Siddha means they are eternally perfect. That means they don't fall down only to this material world. They're always in the internal potency of the Lord. But whenever the Lord descends, like as the Lord descends as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all these souls descend as his associates, not because they are rebellious to the Lord or because they want to taste, or not because they want to enjoy separate from the Lord, but they want to assist in the mission of the Lord. That is how they descend. And even many acharyas, time and again, like the Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and great personalities like that, they are not, born because of some karmas. They are born for a mission, for a purpose. And they come, they execute their mission or purpose, and they go back. So that is about the souls which are Nitya Siddhas. Okay, have I answered Chandana Sahiti?
Thank you, Mataji. But in the shloka that was given, like all the souls are parts and parcels of the God, and never, they cannot go into the God, something like that they have given, no, Mataji.
Can you just tell me which line you're referring to?
Uh,
'Can you give me the reference? Which line you're referring to?
yes, Mataji.
Yeah.
Eighteenth line.
Once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. Yeah. That's what I just told you, right?
I think I will again read the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll forward the shloka, Mataji. Actually, when I was reading it, I understood it like this, Mataji. I mean, like all the other souls are separate from the God, and they cannot get into the Supreme Soul. Then the Supreme
Okay.
Soul will be changeable, something like that. It was there, Mataji.
No, here the context is Prabhupada is telling about how the Mayavada philosophy of oneness with the Lord is wrong. That is,
Yes, Mataji.
yeah, that is, that according to Mayavada philosophy, once the soul attains perfection, they merge with the Supreme Brahman. That means they lose their individual existence. But this is what Prabhupada is saying. No, that is not how it is. Because, eternally, every living entity is eternally separate from the Lord. I mean, they are individual souls and they'll eternally continue to exist. This is what we have done in the second chapter. The soul does not lose its individuality even after attaining liberation. So what is your...
Mataji, but we call it as moksha, that we will get, we will attain moksha, then we will actually go into the God, and we won't be separate from him, something we will have like that, no, Mataji? Attaining moksha.
From where did you get that understanding?
Not from Bhagavad Gita, Mataji, but I have read few texts. Even in the Adi Shankaracharya's Dakshinamurti Ashtakam also, it will be said that the soul is not different from the Supreme Soul. Like that only it will, the meaning of the stotram is also.
See, yeah, that's what I was exactly telling. That's Mayavad philosophy. The soul is Achintya Bheda Veda. That means it is simultaneously one with the Lord and different from the Lord. Both happen simultaneously. One with the Lord means one in quality and never in quantity. Like, for example, the soul, there is drop and there is ocean. Yeah. So you take drop from the ocean. Is the drop and the ocean the same?
No, Mataji.
Yeah, it is yes and no, because the drop has the same physical and chemical properties as the ocean. It's salty and liquid nature, everything. But it's
But again,
different
when
in
the drop is again thrown into the ocean, it cannot be again separated, no, Mataji.
a little softer. Yes. Yeah. Once it is thrown into the ocean, it cannot be separated. What is this? You can always remove a drop from the ocean, na? See, this analogy is for you to understand that, one in quantity and not in, one in quality and not in quantity. Similarly, the jiva is the same in quality with the Lord, that is Satchidananda. Both are Satchidananda, but not in quantity. As we just spoke again the difference between the Lord and the jiva and Ishvara. Jiva is infinitesimal and Ishvara is infinite. Yes. And the Adi Shankaracharya philosophy, it speaks about the it had a that's what as I said, the Lord descends at different periods of time to establish religion as per their understanding. So Adi Shankaracharya's philosophy is majorly it's Mayavad, but Adi Shankaracharya himself, he in the final days he glorifies the devotion to the Lord. After that, after Adi Shankaracharya appearing, that's when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears, and he just puts aside the Mayavad philosophy. In fact, he establishes that Mayavad philosophy is a very dangerous philosophy. One should not entertain that, because Mayavad philosophy believes that when the soul merges with the supreme Brahman, it loses its existence. But this is very false. The soul is, that's what second chapter of Gita is telling very clearly. There was never a time that you did not exist, nor any of these king's person, and never will be there a time they will not continue to exist. That means they have existed in the past and they will exist in the future also. That means they were individuals in the past and they will continue to be individuals in the future also. So then you might ask me, then what is Brahman liberation? So Brahman liberation is a stage of liberation where the soul, wanting to lose its identity, it merges with the Brahman, but these people eventually fall back again to this material world because individuality is there in their nature. This is given very clearly in Srimad Bhagavatam. So what you're talking about, the liberation by merging into the Brahman, yes, that is also there, but it is temporary because a soul cannot sustain in that position for long because of its original nature of servitude to the Lord. That is why many souls who merge into the Brahman, they fall back again to this material world and take up the process of devotion and then go back to Godhead, because that is the natural position of the soul. Could you get it?
Yes, Mataji. Then what is the end of the process, or where is the end, Mataji? I mean,
where is the end? Then that is what for a fish that is out of water, what is its ultimate destination? Being back in water. Similarly, the jiva who is out of the spiritual world, what is the ultimate destination? Going back to the spiritual world. In the consciousness of, in his original consciousness. The spiritual world is, I'm not just talking about a place, it's also the consciousness. Right now, material world, material consciousness means I am this body and I am the enjoyer. And spiritual world, spiritual consciousness means I am the servant of Lord and Krishna is the enjoyer and I am made for his enjoyment. This is the original nature of the soul. So when you're back in that consciousness, you're back in your natural situation, and just like fish is back in the water, the soul is back in its original condition. So that is the end of it. There is no end. Yeah.
I have heard that, there is a world called Manidvipam. In that, all the gods go to there. From the different worlds, different gods, after attaining, for example, if at all in this, God chooses someone again. Who is good, God will choose again when the even the Narada himself has said, no, Mataji. Earlier he was not Narada. He was just a son. He did tapas and everything, and then he got the stage of Narada. So similarly, every person will get into a stage like that. Maybe after this, like Bal Chakravarti, after ending of Kali Yuga, he will become the next Indra. So the positions will be transferred to persons. And similarly, even the Indra who is present, he might be getting another powerful post than this, no Mataji.
Okay.
So everything, I mean, like everyone goes to the post ahead of their post of the present being. So if at all everyone will attain, I mean, like one or the other time, everyone shall get the positions ahead of this present position, no Mataji.
It's not compulsory, right? If a person is doing good karmas, he will go into better position. But if the person does bad karmas, he will fall down based on one's activities.
I mean, there may be a stage where everyone does the good karma and everyone get a better position. Then what will happen, Mataji? I mean, then no one will be in the human world.
So you're perplexed that this earth will be without any population.
Maybe then the earth will also be a adobe of only gods. I mean,
Okay, so your question is what will happen if everybody gets liberated? Okay, that's good, no? Everybody gets liberated, but don't worry, there are sufficient number of rebellious souls all over the universes, so the earth will be repopulated within no time.
I mean, if everyone gets liberated and everyone goes ahead of their position, then what is the last position, Mataji? I mean, then will everyone get into Manidvipam and stay there forever? Is there something like that? Or?
See, first of all, what is this Manidvipam that you need to kindly give me some reference where, because I have not come across this Manidvipam in anywhere across in Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. But still, considering Manidvipam, you're speaking about, see, there is, when you're talking about Indra and all of them, Bali Chakravarti becoming Indra, and everybody is in the process of ascending, into a higher position. That's good. We have to feel happy about it. And and just like in Earth is populated with different jivas from not just from Earth, there are many millions of universes and many Earths and many millions of rebellious souls. So if everybody is ascending to a higher position, that's great, and we have to be happy for it. And if you don't if you have ascended to a position that is higher than the qualification that is needed to be on earth, you will be promoted to that higher position. Like for example, all the people who are being killed here in our Kurukshetra war, they are promoted to the sun planet. That is a higher position than earth.
That's what, Mataji. If everyone gets promoted, the starting ones who have got promoted, where will they go, Mataji? I mean,
everybody according to their deserving, according to what they deserve and what they desire, get their destination.
I mean, what is the highest thing of the promotion? Will they get? I mean, like you have said that if at all we get into the God, it is only for some time, and again we will take the rebirth.
Not God. Please understand carefully. I'm talking about the impersonal liberation. There are different types of liberation. The impersonal liberation, what is impersonal liberation? There's something called Brahma Jyoti. That is, and just the effulgence of the Lord. So people who want to, who follow either Mayavad philosophy, or they believe that they do not want their individual existence, they merge with this impersonal effulgence or Brahman. But since that is not the natural position, they come back, they fall down to earth. But if they regain their spiritual nature and consciousness of being the eternal servant of God, and they enter into the spiritual world, which is beyond this impersonal effulgence. Once they enter into the spiritual world, they don't come back. They're eternally existing in the spiritual world. You could get the difference between impersonal effulgence and the spiritual world.
Yes, Mataji. Yeah. Then the spiritual world will be expanding. Is it fine?
Pardon, one second. What will happen to the spiritual world? Yeah, spiritual world can accommodate any number of people. You don't worry about, they don't have real estate problems like Hyderabad and India. Okay. So your question is like, what will happen to the jail if everybody is released from the jail? Is
Ma'am,
it?
then now if at all the Indra gets a better position, then the position which is held by another person, where will that person go? Maybe he might be ascended further, and where will that person go?
You're talking about the previous Indra?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So that previous Indra, depending if he is qualified to be an Indra, he will be an Indra in a different universe. There are millions of universes. There is no dearth to position. And, and if he's qualified for a post higher than that, he will be given a higher post. And if he's not qualified even for the position of Indra, he will deteriorate to the lower post. In fact, in one place, Krishna himself tells that if there is nobody qualified in a universe to be, and position of Indra is not ordinary or cheap. It takes a lot of, evolution of a person to reach that stage. And Krishna tells that if there is nobody who is fit to be an Indra or Brahma, I myself incarnate as that position, as a person. Because it's not so easy to become Brahma or Indra, or to get that position. It's a very coveted position.
It means then there is a chance that a person can fall off from the position, and again he has to complete all the tasks to again go for the spiritual world or attain the
Yes. Unless we are qualified and attain to the stage of pure devotional service, you have to do the Chakra Brahmana wherever you are in all the floating planetary system. Brahma Bhuvanarloka Punaravrittino Arjuna Mamupetya Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate. That means Brahma Bhuvanarloka, in all the floating planetary systems, they're all places of misery. Punaravritti, that means you have to do this Chakra Brahmana. Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi. In all the 14 planetary systems, these 4 miseries exist. But only a person who is surrendered to Krishna, Mam Upetya tu Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate. Only when you're surrendered to Krishna, you will not have a rebirth. If not, you be in, Swargaloka or even Satyaloka, Brahma's planet itself. Even Brahma has his own lifespan. After finishing his lifespan, he has to take a birth again. Brahma is a jiva, like any of us.
That means, does he have to start from the beginning of being human?
It depends on what Krishna gives him. Depends upon what are his activities. Did he perform his activities well? Did he elevate himself by the process of devotion? Or did he just remain in the process of jnana? Or, how did he do his universal administration affairs? That is the service that is given to him. How did he perform those activities? And how did he lead his life? Just like how, our karmas are supervised and we are given a body based on that, so is Lord Brahmaji too. It's the same for every jiva.
All the gods and demigods, they have to, based on their process, they have to take a birth again, or they will be gone to the higher position. All the persons who have gone into the spiritual world, they will just stay in the spiritual world. That's
exactly.
it, Mataji.
Yes. Once you go to the spiritual world, there is no question of coming back again. And of course, the demigods and their position, they are all in a higher level of intelligence. That's what they are called suras. Suras means demigods or devatas. Generally, they're bestowed with higher intelligence, because of which they generally do not fall down. Because they have made proper use of intelligence, they have reached the position. But
they will have higher intelligence than the people in spiritual world, Mataji.
No. Higher intelligence than the earthly human beings. They're more in sattva guna.
Mataji, then can they also go into the spiritual world, Mataji?
Yes, if they perfect their life by the process of devotion. See, the visa to spiritual world is the same. Either you're belonging to the heavenly planets or the earthly planets or the hellish planets. If you have perfected your life by following the process of bhakti, when you have attained the consciousness of pure devotional service, and when you have transcended the material consciousness of life. That is when you are ready to go back to the spiritual world.
Mataji, then Bali Chakravarti, he's a, I mean, devotee of God, no Mataji. Then why can't he go to the spiritual world, and why will he be promoted to Indra's position?
That's the service that has been given to him. If he performs that, for example, Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj is a pure devotee of the Lord. Yeah, and Lord Narsingadev himself has appeared and asked him what he would want. Yes, that means he's attained perfection in devotion. And what did Narsingadev say? That bhogena punyam kushalena papam. Whatever remaining punya you have to you have to enjoy that. That means you continue your remaining life as a king and you rule as a king. And then at the end of life, you will come back to me. So one has to finish that period of life and the service.
Then is it that Bali Chakravarti has a period left for the good deeds so that he has to...
Yes.
Mataji, it is said that above the 14 lokas, there is a Manadvipam where goddess stay with Lord Shiva, and everyone in that loka actually shall be a woman. Only women can, even the Vishnu, if he wants to enter that loka, he has to take up as a woman. Only then he can enter that loka. It is something like that, Mataji.
Can you send me the reference of it, where you're quoting this from?
Actually, you can find it, Mataji. It is there in a book, Manadvipa. In all the shlokas, Manadvipa Varnana is also a shlok.
See, there is something called Mahesha Dham, that is where Lord Shiva stays. So Lord Shiva is not like the Jiva. He is just like, milk, when it is touched by some souring agent, becomes curd. Vishnu Tattva, when he is touched by the little bit of mode of ignorance, that's when Shiva Tattva appears. And Shiva Tattva is far superior. It's not, you cannot equate it to Jiva. Like Brahmaji, as I said, it depends. Brahmaji is a Jiva. It is a position you can attain. But you can become Brahma, but you can never become Lord Shiva. Because Shiva is coming from Lord Vishnu himself. So Shiva Tattva is different, and his place is called Mahesha Dhama. This is what is described in Bhagavatam. Yeah, the Bhagavatam 5th canto describes about the place of Lord Shiva, in fact, yeah. There is never an instance, whatever you're describing about that Manidvipa, you can just send me the reference. We can look into it.
Mataji, I'll take a picture of the book and I will send it, Mataji.
Okay.
And also, I have heard it like Vishnu has did the tapassu to get a half part in Shiva. So they are not different persons.
No, you need to give me the reference of all this. Because Krishna has, one thing is Krishna has appeared as Mohini Murti in front of Lord Shiva as a woman. And that too was because Lord Shiva was very eager to see the Mohini Murti form of Lord Vishnu. And in fact, at that time, Lord Vishnu warns Lord Shiva that, this is not for you. It's difficult to handle. But still, Lord Shiva wanted to see the Mohini Murti form of Krishna, of Vishnu. That's when he reappeared as Mohini Murti.
This is something different than that, Mataji. As Parvati Devi got a half part in Shiva, similarly, Vishnu also did tapassu to get a half part in Shiva. It's like that.
No. This is, you need to give me a reference of this, because this is, which Purana you're quoting, which book you're quoting, you have to be very clear before talking about these things.
Actually, I have heard it from Chaganti Pravachanalu, like that.
Yes. So we need the reference for it. The reference books from where you're quoting. That's very important.
For Manadvipa Varnana, I can send you the pic, Mataji, but for this, I don't have a pic actually.
Yeah. You have to quote the book, the reference of what you're talking about. Okay?
Okay, Mataji.
Yes. Okay, thank you all very much. So we will meet again.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. We'll meet next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.